he has given different signs to the creation, right? So like he has given different doors that leads to his love. He's also given different signs and indicators to his existence and to who he is. But I think what's probably happening and what's probably blocking us is that we have sort of, even though we are not physically wearing these virtual reality goggles, but it seems like we are, right? Because when we wake up and we see all these signs around us, we sort of do not reflect on that, and we just like, look, we are either too narrow-sighted or too much distracted with what's on the screen or what's on our VR goggles, if we were to say that, and this leads us to kind of missing out. But however, if we were to step back and then actually really appreciate what Allah has created and the nuances of it and the details of it and how things work, and even in our own individual life, the life of our family, of different transitions, different things that are happening for us, and how Allah is blessing us in different angles, then we would potentially be able to realize that more and experience that more. And as you mentioned about if we were to connect with the Book of Allah, then we are reminded of who Allah is, right? So that's kind of giving you that knowledge, reconditioning you, affirming you that knowledge of who Allah is and all the different attributes that we talked about.
In marketing, we have this thing, it's called banner blindness. And what banner blindness is, that people are so used to seeing the banners that are flashing on websites in the old days when they had banners, that they basically became blind to them. And even though the banner is right there in your face and it's flashing, they actually say that they cannot see it, it's blind, right? And some of the signs of Allah like this, like you go outside, right? Like there's a beautiful day, the sun is out, the blue skies and the birds are flying, and you don't think of Allah, you just think a normal day, right? And it's that whole banner blindness. So I think like this is why it's so important to have reminders and to go through the Book of Allah every day and these kind of things, so that it can constantly remind you. And I can imagine like this is why Salah is so important, because you're constantly reminding yourself of Allah every single day, 5 times a day. Whereas imagine if Allah said, okay, no one has to pray, it's not compulsory, right? I can imagine people going weeks and months without thinking about Allah, even Muslims.
For sure. Yes, I think these rituals are definitely very, very helpful. It gives you that at least some sort of a structure that you have to at least show up, even if your quality is not high or what have you. But being there, then you can talk about the quality. Then you can kind of step in and take it forward, for sure. Like, so a lot of these habits are built into it. That if we take it perhaps to the next level of quality, that's what would lead to this basira and having these consistent and constant reminders and these checkpoints or pit stops in our day, if you will.
Sure.
Great. So I think, so if we were to move on from this, and then the next thing sort of comes down to the basira about commands and prohibitions, right? So yes, sometimes people like, well, okay, I don't want to talk about the do's and the don'ts, and I just want to be like all, hard and just knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But, those commands and attributions are manifestations of you knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you actually believing in him and you believing in his commands and so on and so forth. So he talks about once you have that sort of basira, then you're not finding ways to run away from it. You're not finding ways to find interpretations or excuses that, this is not applied today. And yes, it is nice, but this is better and so on and so forth. Like all this jargon and argumentation that happens to find things to kind of work around it and find a way to escape those commands. But you actually understand it, you believe in it, you know that this is meant for you to be successful, for societies to be successful as an overall entity. And then you willfully commit to it. And look, you know what, I'm going to put in my best effort to make sure that this happens. Right, kind of like the example we were talking about earlier about the protein shake or the training regimen or your work ethics when it comes to training. If you trust your trainer, if you've seen him delivering results and you trust his knowledge and wisdom, it may be hard, but you're like, you know what, man, I'm committed to this training plan, I'm committed to this diet, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think this is actually an important point, right? We need to stop and think about this for a second, right? That when it comes to knowing Allah, okay, we like knowing Allah, we like knowing about His mercy, all these things. But when it comes to the time to actually do something for the sake of Allah, like something He's commanded, like praying, or it comes the time to not do something, like Allah tells you to stay away from this sin, why is it at that point we do feel like, oh, I don't really want to be commanded too much, and I don't really want to be restricted and do this and not do that and all of this? Why is that? I think a lot of this is actually to do with the ego again. And we discussed the ego very early on, right? Like the ego wants what it wants. And part of our success as human beings is realizing that we actually are here as Allah's slaves. And it's interesting because, we're kind of near the end of the year now, and I've been looking at planning, and we were talking about how I'm looking at my planning. And one of the things I do when I plan is I sit down and I write down, like, what is it that I want? Like, what do I actually want to achieve this year, like in the coming year, inshallah, right? And what was very interesting this year when I was planning, I wrote some really good stuff, and even stuff for the sake of Allah I wrote, right? Like, I want to do this, I want to do that. But then I took a step back and I thought to myself, you know what? Like, before I think about what do I want, maybe I should be thinking, what does Allah want from me? Like, what does Allah actually want from me? Like, if I've ever thought that, because when I'm planning, I'm kind of planning like I'm the master of my world, and I'm the one who's going to do this, and I want this, and I want that. But the way a slave thinks is actually very different. A slave thinks first of fulfilling everything that the master wants done, and then if he gets time, if he gets a chance, if he gets some opportunity, then he will go and do what he wants, right? So I had to kind of like really shake my mind up and think about this. And I think that with his commands, with his prohibitions, it's the same way that we get caught up in the dunya, right? Because Allah gives us so many blessings, we get caught up like, okay, this is my life and this is what I want to do, and we can very easily forget that this is actually Allah's life. This life He's given us, it belongs to Allah. We are His creation, and we need to fulfill His conditions, His commands, and all these things before we start focusing on what we want.